Hi, kitty cats. Trump's recent attacks on, well, pretty much anyone who disagrees with him focus on intelligence. That is, if you disagree with Trump, that becomes evidence you must be dumb. But intelligence isn't about whether you would agree with a politician. I mean, heck, even Trump doesn't agree with Trump half the time. Instead, intelligence is a model for building cognition. It's the ability to think on your own. After that, intelligence loses its potency because your ability to apply what you know is what makes a difference in your success. Now, that said, you can only build on what you've been able to experience, and some of us never get the chances that others do. And that's what we need to talk about tonight. Not that disagreeing with a politician makes you dumb, but that any hierarchy is going to end with some people on the bottom. Well, let me say hello to some people here. I got hello, Angela and Margie, and I saw Genevieve, right? Ever growing Bastion is here. Hello. Local Queer. Hello. And Forrest is here. Hello, Forrest. All right, so here are some opening plugs. I'm Dr. Amethysta Herrick. I am both a scientist and a content creator. What I do is discuss identity and gender using the scientific method. You can find out a ton of information about me and the work that I do if you just go to the website down below, purplepawclan.com. There you can find the social media networks I'm on. You can read the articles I write. You can listen to and watch the podcasts that I record. You can join our Discord server. Come be part of the solution by being part of the discussion. And finally, you can also find out about the hypnotherapy work that I do to help people work through some of these issues with identity and gender. If you'd like to support my work, you can get a subscription on their website for as little as $5 a month. You can also sign up for the newsletter that comes out every so often. I was supposed to do one on Sunday. I forgot. But anyway, you can sign up for the free newsletter and you can follow me on social media and like and share what I do. That would be beautiful support. And finally, if you have your own original work on identity and gender, I will also publish other people's work on my website. So please email me using the contact page on my website, which once again, purplepawclan.com. Wow, Spider-Man Tobey Maguire is here. Hello. Oh, my king. Oh, this goes further. Okay. So here we go. So this is, Margie's already made a good point here. Any hierarchy by definition always has most of the people on the bottom. Yes. The reason why I'm doing this particular live stream, I found this article, just scrolling through some things. Found an article recently about what's called the hierarchy of intelligence. Now, believe it or not, hello, Maurice. This is kind of a hot topic right now because of how politics has evolved in, the last, let's say, 10 years. Let's say since 2016, which is 10 years. But so rather than engaging with arguments, we're seeing more and more politicians, more and more pundits just call each other dumb. They just, you're just dumb. If you don't get it, it's because you're dumb. And I don't think there is anyone more guilty of this than Donald Trump. His use of dumb is exactly what makes MAGA devotees, what do we call these? I don't want to use maggot. Maggot zealots, devotees, and it makes them feel like the chosen people. Because Trump just goes, oh, well, those are the dumb people. You're not part of the dumb people. And everybody goes, oh, that's great. Now, it turns out the truth is far more subtle. I'm sure you guessed. Intelligence is not at all based on blind loyalty. Intelligence, when you go to psychologists, psychology, is based on experience. And it turns out actually the more you question what you hear, the more cognitive ability you demonstrate. And this is actually likely, we talked about the Dunning-Kruger effect some months ago. This is likely where the Dunning-Kruger effect comes from. When you don't know enough to know that you're wrong, you can't really question what you hear or what you say, unfortunately. Well, there you go. This probably did it. MAGA sycophants. That might have been the best word for it. But we've heard this conclusion before, right? We've talked about stigma quite a bit. And when talking about stigma, I've mentioned marginalization. Any marginalized group tends to exhibit lower performance than the group that marginalizes them. And that happens because stigma prevents you from knowing if you're wrong, and if you are wrong, how and why you are wrong. So, when I read this article, which had nothing to do with stigma, when I read this article on the hierarchy of intelligence, like a lot of red lights start going off. Is it red flags? Red? Anyway, I was like, because as Margie mentioned, any hierarchy means there are people on the top and people on the bottom. And since this is somewhat of a hot topic in political circles, as you can probably tell in terms of hierarchies, that implies to me we have some people weaponizing this idea of the hierarchy of intelligence. So, tonight, what we're going to talk about, just first of all, what is this hierarchy of intelligence? When we understand that, we can actually discuss what really makes a difference. And that's called the hierarchy of cognitive ability. I promise it's not, there won't be a test at the end. And then from there, we can turn back to this question: is blind agreement proof of intelligence? What about those of us who face marginalization? Is this actually part of why performance suffers? So let's go ahead and start with how psychologists describe this hierarchy of intelligence, because I think you'll end up being sort of surprised what intelligent means to a psychologist. So let me see a few of them. I mean, I don't disagree. Margie says drones are a good name for the libs of TikTok audience. The InfoWars people yes anded each other and made a truly terrifying swarm. That's no doubt. I mean, I'm laughing about this, and I'm trying to laugh about it because it's so horrible to think about. There you go. Let me see. Joshua is asking me, what exactly do I stand to gain from teaching people to sterilize themselves? Maybe you didn't look at the title, or maybe you didn't hear what I was talking about that we're talking about tonight. So I guess live it up, Joshua. All right, let's move on to the hierarchy of intelligence. And so, I was hoping that we were actually going to go, that we weren't going to talk so long tonight. So here we go. Let's see. The hierarchy of intelligence. When we think of intelligence, like if you were to ask me, what does intelligence mean? Typically, we think about people who do well on tests. You know, they're well spoken. They use good grammar, whatever, punctuation. They have lots of degrees or something, Ph.D. after their name. Who even knows? But it turns out that intelligence is considered to be separate from cognitive ability. One is only a model for the potential to reach an elevated state of cognitive ability, which sounds super duper, technical, but it isn't. So let's start just with that model. When you look at any species, and because this isn't just about humans, right? This is intelligence is a general characteristic, much like sex, by the way. Other species live on the planet, as we know, and have their own examples of intelligence. So, this hierarchy of intelligence, as defined by psychology, is very simple. So what do I got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are only 6 levels of this. It starts off with instinctive intelligence. These are reflexes, basically. It's things that we don't have conscious thought, right? You stick your hand on something hot, you go, ooh, dang. You move your hand away. You might say something a little stronger than ooh, dang. But those are the types of things. Pain responses, reflexes that don't need conscious thought. So this isn't instinctive intelligence. Just from that, you know that we consider earthworms to have some sort of intelligence. But if you touch them, they go, ah. They shrink away from you. From instinctive intelligence, we go to sensory motor intelligence. This is just, the ability to coordinate what you see with actions that occur. So like recognizing patterns, manipulating objects, pick up a thing and move it over here. The next level up is just called concrete operational thinking. That's called about classifying objects, like some spatial understanding, understanding that like a cup can hold volume, things like that. Then we get to what I think we would typically consider intelligence, which is basic problem solving, which is, you identify an obstacle, You brainstorm some sort of possible solution, you select the best. There you go. From there, so basic problem solving is pretty, like, we look around and we go, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things that do basic problem solving. Corvids, dolphins, whales, chimpanzees. So basic problem solving. Then we go to abstract reasoning. That's the next level up. Logical analysis, creative synthesis, things like that. Here's where you can go, well, so one's analysis, one is synthesis. When you go, well, what does this mean? And then you can say, well, how can I take this information and turn it into something new? And the last level, told you there were only 6, is called metacognition. So this is thinking about thinking, being able to monitor your own thoughts and regulate your cognitive processes, typically for the sake of making them better. But that's it. That's what we consider intelligence. That's how psychology defines intelligence. Looking at this model, you might see various things. First of all, basic problem solving is really the gateway to cognitive ability, right? You don't, unless you can see yourself with some form of agency, being able to solve problems is very difficult. Remember that, right? Because when we had talked about stigma, again, over the course of many live streams, the agency that you can perceive actually makes up a significant proportion of performance. Because if you don't think you have any agency, you're not going to be able to perform well. So you're not going to know where you can affect certain things. Anyway, basic problem solving, that is just the starting point. Abstract reasoning, that's a step up. This is being able to see the world for what it's worth. This is being able to see the world in less than black and white, or perhaps in Trump's case, dumb or smart. And then the pinnacle that we go, oh, look at this. We are humans. The pinnacle is metacognition. It's being able to look inside. And I think a great way of saying this is my definition. I didn't pull this from anybody. I think one of the real aspects of metacognition is being able to look inside and see if you are the problem that you need to solve. Now, I think that's very important. And it's also why intelligence is not where psychology ends. Psychology went on to consider what intelligence means. Like, you can acquire this. You can get to the point where you go, oh, let me think about thinking. Great, you've got metacognition, but what does it mean? This is what led to what's called the hierarchy of cognitive ability. This one's going to be much more interesting, by the way, because our cognition is all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, and our emotions aren't necessarily based on intelligence. So now we can move on to talk about how that affects lifelong success, if nothing else. Let me see. Let me check some of these things. Yeah. Oh no. Bo brings up Idiocracy went from a satire to a reality. I saw some clips and it was just like, there are no words. There are no words. So Angela says in the 60s, yeah, they said that being dyslexic meant you were dumb. Yeah, my graduate advisor faced that, and as a result, actually still believed that. He was my graduate advisor, professor of chemistry, right? Hey, Minnie, hello. He was a professor of chemistry and was like, oh yeah, well, I was dyslexic. They told me I was dumb. It stuck with him. And it's interesting because then Angela goes on to say they have found most of us are above average intelligence. They go. I don't know what this refers to. Maybe our plants are just craving electrolytes. I think that's probably true. Yeah. I forget what I might have said about that. But then Bo goes on to say there's a reason the higher-ups do not send their children to public schools. Good point. Very good point. So, cogito ergo dolio. So Latin for I think therefore I am depressed. Is that not therefore I cry? Therefore I am dolorous. So yeah, I'm with you. Okay. Hello, Sleepy Jen. Okay, let's move on. The hierarchy of cognitive ability. I told you this one's more interesting. What psychologists realized is that intelligence is not the final word in success. I'm sure you know loads of people who are very book smart and exceptionally street dumb. There are people, you've got people, they'll like recite raid mechanics from World of Warcraft, from like something that was gone 20 years ago, right? But then you see them pushing on a door that's clearly labeled pull. So there must be something else involved here. So what psychologists, and this goes back almost a century, more than a century now, they realized is that intelligence has to be applied in order for it to be useful. For instance, if you're pushing on a door, you're able to read the word pull, and you're pushing on the door, you have not applied that particular piece of intelligence. So intelligence has to be applied. I mean, unless what you want to do is be shunned at a party, for talking about raid mechanics from World of Warcraft. Most of us don't view that as a success. Most of us. Not all of us. There's at least a few people out there who are like sitting in a corner going, boy, I really did a great job here. Yeah. Ain't no one wants to talk to me. Cool. So, cognition is different from intelligence. Cognition is all of the mental processes that, let me say, an organism uses. Because that's perception, attention, memory. Maybe you remember we talked about memory recently. Language, reasoning, decision making. Intelligence is about how well all of those processes work together. So intelligence gives us the ability to solve new problems, to adapt to new situations, assuming we have the cognitive ability to do so. Just go back to that World of Warcraft guy. So now we have the hierarchy of cognitive ability. Oh, here we go. Sorry. Here was what it said. The plants craving electrolytes is an idiocracy reference. I'm sorry. Should have caught that. Yes, I should have caught that. Gatorade casserole too. So now we have this hierarchy of cognitive ability, because it turns out the hierarchy of intelligence is really only a set of skills, and they are skills that have to be developed. They can be developed, and they have to, because I suppose the instinctual one does not. The reflexes, no, but everything else requires some sort of development. So here's a quick history. Going back to 1904, there's a guy named Spearman. He correlated verbal reasoning, so verbal reasoning, with spatial tasks and memory. So he correlated, basically said anybody who has good verbal reasoning skills is going to do better with spatial tasks and memory. And that was his one single factor. He said this is what defines intelligence. General intelligence is what he called it. General intelligence. You might go, well, that sounds like a bunch of crap. Yes, there was a whole lot of argument, and for some reason it appeared to bear out. And it bears out because as you grow cognitively, you build things like verbal reasoning. And that brings in things like spatial tasks and memory. And you build, with those things, you build advantages in real world success. So this is why when you looked at these things, you can go, okay, there appears to be a correlation. So that's what Spearman did, 1904. Fast forward 60 years, 1963, 59. 1963, a guy named Cattell. Cattell adds two new little bits: fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. If you know how a liquid crystal works, you're going to go, shoot. I don't know if I like these two words. But in 1963, I don't remember if we had liquid crystals yet, or if we had made liquid crystal displays. I don't know. I should ask the engineer in the audience. Margie, do we have those in 1963? So Cattell adds this fluid intelligence, this crystallized intelligence. These are two primary types of intelligence. He says you have got general intelligence, and these are two things that sort of operate beneath it. Fluid intelligence just means your reasoning ability. This is a cognitive ability, right? It's your pattern recognition. It's your ability to think about a problem without having prior knowledge around it. And then conversely, crystallized would mean your accumulated knowledge. This is how you have been able to integrate your experience to solve similar problems. And we see this in the fields of vocabulary, domain knowledge, cultural knowledge, procedural knowledge, so things like that. So we got 1963. You've got general intelligence, fluid and crystallized. Now we bust forward 20 years. A guy named Gardner. Gardner split the whole idea into many unrelated intelligences. And he came up with like 8 or 9. I don't know. Let me count them. 8 or 9 is linguistic, logical, mathematical, spatial, musical, body kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalist, and existential. These are his, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that's 9. Okay. So those were the 9 distinct intelligences that Gardner talks about. This kind of feels like not a model, right? You sort of go, But it was intended to say that no intelligence is better than any other. That intelligence is really a complex as opposed to a hierarchy. That you have all of these skills that you have all these skills that you put together, and that's how you make it through life. We're almost there, I swear. 1985, only 2 years. Person named Sternberg takes Cattell, who added fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence, turns it into 3 different things. Triarchic theory. Sure. These are 3 types that are loosely coupled. And you've probably seen this before, the analytical, creative, and practical. If you ever took an SAT or a GRE back in the day, it's a little different now. But if you took the SAT or the GRE, what they tested you on were literally those 3 types of intelligence: analytical, creative, and practical. And so that was 1985. It feels like from 1983 to 1985, like that was okay. And then we get to 1993. One of the biggest influences here was Carroll. So a person named Carroll. So Carroll added these open-ended types as part of general intelligence. So sees 3 levels of abstraction total in an explicit hierarchy. So you've got your general intelligence, which is fed by particular skill intelligence, and this is why it's open-ended. And then underneath that, you have whatever it is that contributes to a skill. So almost like Gardner might have been, but not really. The idea is that you still end up with this concept of general intelligence. And we've left it largely at Carroll for 33 years. 1993, that was the year that my niece was born. There you go. If you're out there, Willow, hi. So some key points here, then we'll move on. Most intelligences can be trained, including things like fluid intelligence, your ability to reason. You can train metacognitive processing. You can train these things. So experience means a ton. Crystallized intelligence, if we were going to go with that, affects performance greatly. And also, cognition includes what we haven't really talked about, but emotional intelligence. And this ends up being more of an indicator of leadership than really anything else. So, now to finish up this bit of discussion, we can talk about how intelligence and cognitive ability actually affect you, especially as you come up against people who only want to label you as dumb. So let me see, what do we got? It's me, hi. I don't think I've ever heard that song. I'm the problem. Well, this is good. Look, and Angela says she never felt dumb because her parents always said she was intelligent. That's good. Oh, you got sent to a private school. Well, that's good. Oops, did that get there? Yeah. So now Bo makes a good point. A lot of public schools now, depending upon where you are, barely teach things like English. Bo says she learned her communication skills from binge watching The X-Files. There you go. We're going to get to that. There's a great point to be made there. So Genevieve says, my dad used to call her a dumb kid. Her dad used to call her a dumb kid. So did mine. Not really the way to improve somebody's chances of survival, for what it's worth. And thank you, by the way, for Margie for telling me that LCDs were about around that time. Hi, Laura Jean. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to talk about here, they want you to believe you're dumb. I saw on the Discord server, a couple of people had put a little crying emoji on this announcement because it's a big icon that says they called you dumb. That was the point. They want you to believe you are dumb. I started off this entire topic with Donald Trump, right? His measure of intelligence is whether or not you agree with ultimately his ever-changing opinions. Like I said, I don't even know if he does a great job of agreeing with himself all the time, which is faith. That's not cognitive ability, nor is that intelligence. That is faith. But he uses the word intelligence in particular as his platform, and it makes a ton of sense. One of the things that psychologists have found is that intelligence does follow a bell curve. Maybe you remember a book, I think from 2001, so it's been a while. I think it was 2001, called The Bell Curve. And that bell curve, that book there said, well, this is why white Christian nationalist people, didn't really go that far, but why white people own the world. Because white people are on this side of the bell curve and everybody else is on the other side of the bell curve. What we know beyond a shadow of a doubt is that the bell curve is heavily affected by intersectional effects, all kinds of intersectional effects. Socioeconomic status, for sure, but gender makes a huge difference here because there are many men who are never going to learn some things that women are trained to do, and vice versa. I don't say either way. What parents teach their children tends to be highly gendered. Parents are imparting the norms of their social environment, and one of those obviously was another, Genevieve's dad. That was one of some norm that he wanted to impart. So using intelligence as a way to delineate people, to group people, categorize people, ultimately is kind of a subtle way of marginalizing others, especially when really what we're looking at is blind faith, not cognitive ability. I want to return to a point that I know I've made over and over and over. Stigma does not reside in the person. Stigma comes from a set of beliefs in a group of people toward another person. The stigma exists in the group that wants to stigmatize. So when you look at things like blind faith, it's a way to marginalize others because it's that greater group. Well, I mean, in this case, we're talking about Trump and a lot of MAGA people, whatever. So it's a subtle way to marginalize others. We have extremely little evidence about how heritable intelligence is. Intelligent parents don't imply intelligent children, and I think that's why my father called me dumb, because I think he was like, look at how bright I am. What's wrong with you? So intelligent parents don't imply intelligent children, and more importantly, cognitive ability is even less obviously heritable. Parents who are good leaders, parents who have good emotional intelligence, will not imply children who are good leaders or high emotional intelligence, and vice versa again. Emotional intelligence and the ability to monitor when you personally become the problem in the room. And finally, we do know that children who don't get enough stimulus, by stimulus I mean everything that would contribute to building up the skills of intelligence, children who don't get enough stimulus to build those foundations, they struggle for the rest of their lives. They can't catch up. So that means intelligence and its associated cognitive ability is in part dependent on social environment. If you never have the opportunity to learn from a certain experience, you cannot apply that experience using more advanced cognitive processes. So, a little bit of a summary here. Let's return to Trump. Trump and many politicians. It's not just Trump. They want to divide people into smart or dumb, and they just go, well, what do you have on your little ticket there? Is it a D or is it an R? They want to divide people into smart or dumb based on the amount that you agree with their policies. But what really groups people is the ability not to agree blindly. What groups people into high cognitive ability or low cognitive ability is the ability to think critically, the ability to see other scenarios, the ability to envision different and better outcomes. And that is exactly what most of our politicians do not want the rest of us to do. That's on purpose. They want you to think that intelligence is very simple. Because if you use your intelligence, you're going to prove them wrong. So, anytime you hear the word hierarchy come up, someone is going to be seen as better, more powerful, more important than the people down below. In our society, probably any society, that is a recipe for marginalization. Intelligence is about integrating knowledge into the situation. Intelligence comes from a lifetime of experience, and cognitive ability allows you to apply that experience in novel ways. There is no hierarchy that exists that invariably drives success. Not even if you agree with Donald Trump. And that was all I had to talk about tonight. Look at that, I knocked it out in 30 minutes. Not often do I do that. What do we got here? Angela says, "Oh, so her husband Andy always thought he was not intelligent because he didn't have academic qualifications." Okay, so Angela says she knew he was intelligent and told him. See, academic qualifications. I mean, I have known chemists, professors of chemistry, who you put them in a lab and they would burn water. I love that particular phrase. You put them in a lab and they would not do well. Um, so I don't think having a PhD or whatever, having academic qualifications naturally makes you intelligent, because it doesn't. I mean, I can tell that. Totally can tell it. So, what else do we have? So I like this. Intelligence is gestalt. I would agree with that. Gestalt, of course, meaning, a greater whole. Well, I don't have the German for it, um, but seeing things in a more holistic light. And I agree. I think that's a ton of it. So Laura Jean says she has ADHD, and in her family always said she was learning disabled. Oh, yeah. So her school did random IQ tests. Okay, so IQ tests are interesting. What IQ tests do is try to measure actual intelligence, not cognitive ability. So it's a fascinating tidbit there. They try to measure things like pattern recognition. I mean, let me go back to that's the wrong one. They try to measure things like basic problem solving, logical analysis, classifying objects. So these are types of intelligence. Obviously, they can't measure things like metacognition. How do you regulate your own cognitive processes? So, I mean, it's a fascinating thing. We look at IQ tests and we go, oh my gosh, these are so important. When I was in fourth grade or something, I was given an IQ test and I came out like, I think it was 149, 100 and something like that, 149, I think. And maybe 139. Doesn't really make a difference, does it? Because I was in fourth grade. And people are like, oh, look at you. Look at how far you're going to go. And how far have I gone? As far as I have gone, I now have people who yell at me on the internet. I have to think about that for a moment. Anyway, IQ tests. Thank you for that, Laura Jean. I like this too. I'll pass on the faith of Trump. I'll take George Michael's. Oh, in a heartbeat. So here you go. So Laura Jean says her dad says they can't specify a child to a number, but she was treated very differently. I think we're actually close to contemporaries, and I agree. I came up with a high IQ value, and they were like, oh, well, we need to do all the things for this kid. And they don't care about other people. Bo had brought up the idea um, that she struggled just to learn English in public schools. And, we have now turned education into something. I don't want to turn this into a huge rant, but we've turned education into something where we do try to specify children to numbers. Now it's not IQ. Now we're using, standardized tests, but those standardized tests you can teach to them. I mean, I'm sure you've seen books. If you ever took the SAT or the GRE, you could get books and they go, well, here's all the questions. Here's how the questions are going to look. And so you can train yourself to do better at those. Ultimately, those turn into logical analysis for what it's worth. So it's developing those characteristics. So anyway, there we go. What else do we have? Yes, I agree. So intelligence has many different forms of expression. Agreed. I mean, you had the gardener from 1983 now, right? 9 different ways, including musical. Body kinesthetic, or bodily kinesthetic. I like that one. And intelligence knowing, an intelligence of knowing how your body moves. I like that. Which I think the thing is, and especially with something like, ooh, gosh, I don't know. I was going to throw this out because I've always like tripped over my own feet. But I do seem to have a good like musical ability. Like I picked up playing the guitar really quickly. I don't know why. So I was like, is that just kinesthetics? I don't know. But anyway, good idea or good point. Oh, I think Genevieve, were we sisters? Maybe we were sisters. Because my dad was definitely a narcissist and thought he was better than everyone else. So, yeah, look at this. Forrest says it sounds like Genevieve's dad was trying to inflate his fragile ego, which is 100% what my dad was doing. Oh, what else do we have? Okay. So then Laura Jean says child IQ studies still show that economics are the biggest measure of child future actualization. Yep. Socioeconomic status. Socioeconomic status is the biggest measure of you said child future actualization. I'll use that too. So, um, oh, to clarify, okay, so you tested high, so you weren't considered stupid. Okay, so even with dyslexia, because that was what you said, right? You had dyslexia, and so your father, I gotta find you. Where is it? Oh, here we go. So, ADHD, sorry. So you had ADHD, learning disabled, but then the high IQ, they went, ooh, gosh, so you're not stupid. That must have made it worse. Were they like, what's wrong with you? You're not even stupid. I don't know. Yes, bodily kinesthetic, I would imagine would martial arts would apply in that. So there you go. A 145 fixed everything, wouldn't it though? Like it totally would. So I'm sure you were pissed off. So this Angela brings up as she's gotten older, she's better able to understand science as well as other types of knowledge, and that makes sense. As you accumulate knowledge, you accumulate knowledge in part by using cognitive ability, and if intelligence is a way of making those processes work better together, I completely believe you. I completely can understand how that would work. So, all right, 540. Look at that. I cranked through this more or less. I didn't think I was going to have anything today, by the way. I was thinking about just coming on and going, hey, what do you say? And then I read that article and I went, damn, now I've got to make notes. It's one of the maybe the bummers, maybe like a bummer of being a content creator. Every single that was going awry. Every single thing I read, every single thing I read or see somewhere, I go, how could I use that? I can't stop, can't stop doing this. All right, so what I'm gonna do, hopefully this was interesting. I'm gonna take a 5 minute break. We'll come back and we'll do some. We'll play some Horizon, which is much more fun, I think, than talking about intelligence. We can actually see. Oh, so much I want to say about Horizon, but speaking about intelligence, because I'll just throw a little bit out here. Obviously, since there are machines walking around that seem autonomous, there is some sort of AI, the aspect that gets into this. So, all right, 5 minutes, and I'll be back. All right, see you shortly.